quite honestly, if you ask me, and I have two of my colleagues with me, Vijay Nadkarni, who's career banker, and he was until recently the CEO of our bank, the Krishna Bhima Samruddhi Local Area Bank, and I have Digpal, Digpal Bahadur, who works in basics consulting and technology services and heads the T2M practice, the technology to markets practice. I thought it would be particularly relevant for him to be here. And Vijay and Digpal, please feel free to, this is a, I'm not going to give a lecture, we'll just run it as a discussion group. So, so basically, I still feel that I'm learning the field, promoting livelihoods, even though, because one has been in the field, so you end up building a reputation and this and that. But when I search my heart, and being an IITian, fellow IITian, you say, "Bhai, asli kaam kuch kiya hai tumne? Seedha seedha bolo. Matlab, can you face your batchmate in the mess?" And I can't. What I can say is, हाँ बॉस 35 साल के लिए ट्राई किया है और बहुत चीज़ ट्राई किया है. And I can tell you about lots of failures and some lessons, some pretty minor successes given the size of the problem. And while we are at it, let me just tell you the size of the livelihood problem, although this session is not about livelihood, as I said. By the way, Disha, did you disclose the title of my talk?
No.
Okay, so I had agreed with Disha that the title would be Designing for the Base of the Pyramid. Is that something that's of broad relevance to all of you?
Yes.
Okay, because I saw your projects and I thought, let me try and put a common theme. And I mean, what you're working in is so many diverse technical specializations that obviously I can't deal with any of the technical details, but I'll deal with two other themes which I think are cross-cutting. And at least Disha seemed to think that you don't have much exposure to those themes, so I'll talk about them. But just to finish that point about livelihood, so to give you an idea of the order of magnitude of the problem that one is trying to address. As you know, India's population is now about 1.3 million, right? 1.3 billion. And not everybody works. The working population is very close to 500 million. Okay? Just the demographic increment to this workforce is 1.8%. So that's like 9 million people joining the workforce incrementally. I mean, this takes into account those who exit and all that. So 1.8% is the demographic increment. So whether you like it or not, at least for the next several years, and the effect of the reduced birth rates will show up 15 years from now, 9 million new people need livelihoods every year. Point number one. And by the way, this has come down. Previous decade, it was 2.2%. There's been a dramatic reduction in the increment to the workforce, both because of reduced fertility and longer years of schooling, and longer years of schooling for women. So due to these three reasons, there's been a dramatic reduction in our incremental workforce. Otherwise, it used to be 12 million. Last decade, increment was 12 million a year. But then the bigger problem is that fully 30% or more, somewhere between 30 and 40%, depending on how you measure the poverty line, are working but below the poverty line. Now, if you're unemployed and below the poverty line, that is understandable. But ye kya hai yaar? You're working also and you're below the poverty line. That means you're doing work which is not being sufficiently remunerated. And if it's not being sufficiently remunerated, it's because it's not adequately productive. Because otherwise, as economics tells us, marginal wage is equal to marginal productivity. So if you were productive enough, your wage rate would go up. So in other words, we have something like 150 million people who we count as workers, but who are actually basically not productive enough. So you have this twin livelihood problem. Okay? The increment to the workforce, and then there's, of course, there's a residual unemployed force, which is roughly about 9%. So that's another 45 million. And then there's this 150 who are unemployed, who are employed but not sufficiently remunerative. So compared to this, कहीं पे अगर हमने 20,000, 15,000, 2,000 लोगों को कुछ रोजगार दिलवा भी दिया on a sustainable basis, so you feel कि हाँ ठीक है, it's okay. Nice story to tell your grandkids, but move on. So therefore, while I'm grateful that society recognizes the work that I do, honestly, as a professional, I still feel that we are still just hugging the x-axis. अभी वो take off नहीं हुआ है. And I hope that in my lifetime I'll see that takeoff, which we saw in the world of IT, which we saw in the world of mobile telephony. I come from that world. I'm an electrical engineer, 75 batch, IIT Delhi. Oh, I'm waiting for the exponential to take off in the livelihood work, But abhi to it's asymptotic to the x-axis, So it's very problematic in that sense. But let's keep that out of the way. That's what I do on my day job. Today I'm here to talk to you about design or designing for the base of the pyramid. And I want to start by asking you a question. Of course, all of you already have projects which you either selected or they were assigned or suggested or whatever. But on what basis did you select those projects? Or on what basis are you at peace with selecting those projects? Maybe I should just ask somebody. Jito, what is your project?
So my project is cooperative control of semi-autonomous battery-powered vehicle. So it's like a mass transit system
where individual.
Yeah, so it's semi-autonomous. So I selected it seeing into the technical aspects.
By the way, I was thinking of it when I was taking that long walk from the plane to the exit of the airport. I was thinking, यहाँ पे perfect लगेगा तुम्हारा. Our airports are so crazily long now. And it just takes just 20 minutes to go to the taxi. Classic example of bad design, by the way. You rush somebody at 800 kilometers per hour from Hyderabad to Bombay, and then you slow them down to 5 kilometers per hour if they're walking at my pace. Talk of intermodal. So, but why did you choose this? Was this assigned to you or did you?
No, it was like I'm doing my master's in control and computing.
Okay.
So this project is like heaven in that thing, like basics to advanced. Technically, it sounds good for me. So that is why
So you chose it yourself.
Yeah.
And because you feel that you know some techniques or you have some broad knowledge in that field. But any attempt at looking at its likely demand or potential applications?
When I was given an option, I was more concerned about the technical thing.
Okay. Let's take Akash.
Sir, my project is on extraction of water from air, so it is basically targeted for a rural space for a rural household of 4 people or 5 people.
Yeah.
And we'll be making water for them for a day or two.
Yeah.
So, sir, basically wherever we go, first thing which everyone talks about is water or energy or electricity. So one is that this sector has a lot of potential. Plus the problem of water is even after so much interventions from so many people, very less percentage of it has reduced.
So you feel at least there's a need there. But supposing you end up producing your water at the price of about, say, 25 rupees a litre, I don't know what you'll produce. Would there be demand for it? If you did it at 2.5 rupees a litre?
then it depends. Maybe for a specific location it can be applicable.
And at 25 paisa a liter?
Then
Plenty. But you haven't explored, do you have any
I don't have
intuitive sense of what the cost will be?
I don't have the costing right now, but
What technology are you using? Are you condensing dew or?
yes, but no, we are not going for the mechanical measure. We are going the chemical way, so we'll be absorbing it into a desiccant and regenerating the water after that.
So, but you need moisture in the air in the first place. So, Latur mein kya hoga? Relative humidity is 0 for like 200 days, yeah?
Sir, it's working in I mean, whatever papers I have seen through, it's working in desert condition also. Only the time span increases, the time required to regenerate water increases. But it's
So,
working-
night condensation.
Yes, it's working in low relative humidities of 20% also.
Yeah?
Sir,
Mark?
I'm working on the same project, like I'm from mechanical engineering background and we are working together on the same project. So my part is basically related to the mechanical design part of it. So what I would like to say, like through this Tata Center, like training sessions and all, the whatever grooming has happened. So like that from that I've learned that we should actually, whatever project we are working on, we should like identify the need and then build the design or product or whatever we are offering from the this thing.
From the?
This, like whatever need which we have identified and then we build the product which we have. So in this project I feel it was some person's idea and like it was not basically, the project was not formulated based on some identified need, like this is the need. So and now I think it has to be validated, like whether really this kind of this kind of innovation, is it really going to be implemented? So I think that's what
Okay. Anybody here who started with the need being articulated by the end user, whether it's individual consumers or an organization? Yeah, Mahajan?
Actually, my guide, sir, Professor Mahajan, he told me about the need. So his friend is.
What is your project?
It's on sand reclamation for small foundries.
Okay.
Sand reclamation units for small foundries. So the need was the reclamation cost. We cannot dump the used sand once it's used in foundry. Government has imposed some stringent conditions, and even pollution control board, it doesn't allow you to dump the sand. So the dumping cost is very high. They have to transport it to Rajangaon from Kolhapur. That is the nearest dumping site. It's 500 kilometers. So the cost of transportation and all is like very much. So what they do is illegally they dump it inside the foundry. They dig up a landfill and they start dumping sand there. So it's like both environmental hazard as well as occupational hazard, because small heavy metals are there and they can get carried away by the air. So the need was given by the foundry owners to Professor Mahajani that if we can have some reclamation unit so that we can use this dump sand again in our foundry bag. So that would improve the economics and that would reduce the environmental burden as well.
Okay. So here we have a clear case of a user actuated project, right? Even if conceptual. Anybody else who's, yeah? Arif?
So my project is on development of bioreactor landfill for a small community like IIT campus. So what happened in city like Mumbai, waste management is a big problem and day by day this problem is increasing. And now Government of India is planning for smart city. So they are also required some waste management so that the total waste can be managed within the premises of the city. So and there is some hazard regarding the open dumping, means leachate which contaminate the groundwater, then fire, as you know the Deona landfill is happening. So that's why we are now planning to develop a landfill, and bioreactor landfill is basically is an accelerated method so that we can generate more facility for waste dumping. Normally the
Let's not go into the technical detail because it's very seductive. But stay focused on the issue. The question I've asked is, where did you get the idea from? Was it from the client or was it from general reading?
General now, actually this bioreactor landfill already exists in only one in whole India. It is near the Kanjurmarg landfill. So basically the waste collection, it costs around 90% of the total cost of the management. So that we are introducing decentralization of waste. So that
No, Arif, once again, don't tell me about the details of the project. Tell me about where did the demand come from?
Did any local community ask for it, articulate the need, and hence you came up with this idea?
Did any community or a municipality or any organization ask for it? Like in his case, it was the Foundry Association of Kolhapur or Ichhal Karanji or wherever.
basically, if we group the technology, then we can implement it to the
This
new
idea is
cities.
your own, right?
So it's basically, okay,
Every
great.
country it exists.
Yeah.
So now we are
Pramod?
implementing it to India.
Sir, actually, in my case, the need was identified based on literature survey. Basically, my project deals with detection and concentration of enteric viruses from potable water. So we are devising a method in order to detect. The method will be quite affordable and reliable. And even this was basically-
But who told you that there is, you're not a,
no literature survey and whatever figures we had. So my guide did that survey.
okay.
And she had devised this project based on those things.
Right. So let's, I think the basic point is made that, we have a spectrum here, starting from, say, Arif, who's, in spite of 3 reminders, hasn't got the point, if I can pick on you, Arif, that I was asking about, was your project actuated by a user? No, right? And then there are, say, Pramod's project, which is kind of assumes that there is a user based on literature survey, but did you go and talk to any enterologist or any public health specialist or any, not directly. So, and then on the other hand, we have Manvinder, where it was actually the users. You have somewhere in between and stuff like that. So, the first point about anything that we do is that there's got to be a need for it somewhere, and need and demand are 2 different things. This is a whiteboard. I can use it, right? Yeah. First of all, need is not equal to demand, huh? But what's the difference? I'm now using the word demand the way an economist uses, yeah.
Maybe one difference we can take it is the people need something but they're not aware of it. And demand is like they are aware.
So that's yet another stage actually, which is implicit need or unexpressed. I'm talking about expressed need. So what's the difference between this and this?
Demand may be something which is not absolutely necessary for survival or as such.
Now we are talking about the difference between need and want. We are moving to another side. Yeah?
The need is something, for example, everyone needs a home, but can everyone afford it?
Everybody?
Everyone needs a home,
Home.
but not everyone can afford it. So the
Right.
demand will be a subset of those people who need it.
So what is the difference between those who you count as part of the demand and those who need it? Like every person who sleeps on the footpath in Bombay needs a home, right? But shall we treat that as the demand for homes? So what is the difference?
Affording.
Affording? Yeah?
So need is the basic necessity of life which you need to survive. While demand is something which is backed by buying power.
Okay, so affording and buying power is one, and what else? I may have buying power, but I don't want to buy it. Then?
So need is something like more individual phenomenon. Like, for example, if my need is maybe a clean toilet, so it's my need. So even if I have like a toilet in my home which is sufficient for 5, that's okay. But demand is like TV. So if in my home there are 2 TVs, but I need but 1, so it's like it will be into demand. So need is something more individualistic approach, and demand is something like having a monetary approach in the market is demand.
Yeah, but market में भी तो individuals ही जाते हैं यार.
Yeah, that's true.
So?
But
So one point we've definitely got is that need and demand is there's a ability to pay, right? But the second attribute has to be there has to be a willingness to pay. Okay. So if you think of this as need as a superset, then demand is that subset where these two conditions are fulfilled. Okay. That part of need, where the user, and the user is not always an individual, it can be an organization, it can be the government. Okay. So where the user is able and willing to pay, that is demand. Okay. The rest is need. Okay. And then there's this whole other debate about, do you really need it? No, I want chocolate, but do you really need it? Right? So that's a separate issue. But when we are working in the field of design and technology, one of the things that because of idealism, youthful idealism, we tend to respond to need, if at all we are approaching it from that side. In fact, if I go by your sample, then there is a supply side, and basically a lot of you are just approaching from the supply side. Either there's a technology available, or there's some funding available, or there's some research, guide available or whatever, So that becomes but on the demand side, as it is relatively few of you have sort of looked at it, and within that, if you do, because of youthful idealism, we look at issues of need rather than demand. All the smart cities in India need solid waste management. Why smart cities? Even smart slums need solid waste management, right? But need se kya hoga? At the end of it, remember, if your design, if the product or the process that you are going to, eventually perfect, if it's ever going to see usage outside the IIT campus, someone's got to be willing to pay for it. Okay? You can come up with the most outstanding, so-called low-cost housing design, which costs only 12 lakhs for 1 BHK, right? But how many slum dwellers would be able to afford it, right? So ultimately, the proof of the pudding is, first of all, we have to start from the demand side and not from the supply side. Okay? And we cannot actually be successful in design if we start only from either because I know some technology or some technique, or because some funding is available, or because some prior knowledge is available, or whatever. We've got to go and interface with the world of the demand side. And there we got to deal with this, heartbreaking reality that, at least in India and most other developing countries, for most things that are of any interest, the superset called need is much, much larger than the subset called demand. Which is why, by the way, I am in livelihood promotion, because if people have livelihoods, they'll have the income to convert their needs into demands. But that's a separate issue altogether. Okay? So first thing, therefore, I would request all of you is that spend 10%, 15% of the time that you have in your project to explore the demand side. Now you can say, I don't know what my demand side is. I mean, like your project, Jitu, for example, or Parth, in some ways, just by reading the title, you say, "Arey yaar, kuch ajeeb sa kuch robot hai, kya hai, complex hai." If you go and start talking to any traffic, government official, I mean, usually it will be a police fellow, unless he's an exceptional person, he'll say, you're talking about some sci-fi, right? So part of the problem is to identify who the users would be in many cases. Same thing with your enteric, this thing, who will be the user?
Government, maybe any of the NGOs or any of the medical facilities.
Well, depends on, at what level you can make the product. Supposing you can actually produce, what are called the household water filters, right? At a level where the enteric bacteria are taken care of, then maybe even household consumers could be users, right? If you can embed your thing in all these RO, आजकल जो चलता है ना, eureka phobes and all that. But if not, if you're working at a level where it can only be embedded in these water treatment plants, then yes, it will be governments or townships, builders, right? But you need to go and have that dialogue, okay? Now, what's even more difficult is that when you're designing a product for people who are at the base of the pyramid, how do you go and have that dialogue? I mean, in some ways, Pramod, yours is that example, right? It's unlikely that in upper class houses this is an issue, right? So where is it an issue? Right? So now, how do you actually go and interface with the users?
So I have to find out the people who are providing the service, suppose the medical unit or some hospital, whether they are facing the problems certainly about these people coming with infections with the enteric viruses.
नहीं, वो तो आपको लिटरेचर सर्वे से पता चल रहा है that there is a significant, diarrheal disease is a very significant cause of infant mortality, among other things. Forget anything else. So it's obviously widespread. But is it because of the storage vessels, or is it because contamination in the source? Where is it happening?
In both the cases, but majorly source.
Source, right?
Equally, I can say, not majorly.
Majorly in the source, right? So then if you have to treat the sources, then you get into a semi-public situation, like a village pond or a large water drawing, maybe equivalent of Powai Lake for a small place, right? So then you have to deal with the so-called authorities, God help us, right? The famous water and sewage treatment authorities. So imagine getting your technology through to them. Wouldn't it be so much better if in the first place you managed to get them on board right at the beginning? So point number one, therefore, I wanted to make was, I don't want to repeat too much, but basically we got to start from the demand side and unpeel that onion as to what is meant by demand side. Who is the user actually? And who is representing the user? Who is the intermediary who would sort of aggregate the demand of all the users and actually become the user? For example, say a municipal authority, right? Even though the end users are individual households, but if your diagnosis is that the problem is at the source, then you have to deal with the municipal authorities, right? Or the panchayats. So then how do you get there? How do you have the dialogue? How do you understand what attributes are important to them, which will have to be part of your design if it has to go outside the boundaries of the IIT campus. Otherwise, it's a nice MTech thesis or whatever it is called. After that, how many of you would like to see your project being used actually? Everybody, right? I would imagine so. So if you'd like to seeing it as being used, don't you think that you need to talk to users at the earliest possible stage? Right? So I think that point is made. We'll move on from here. So while Dikpal is setting it up, I'll tell you about an example of how you do this assessment. This is a very simple product, technologically no big deal. A solar home lighting system, standalone, lantern. Hundreds of them available. So the issue is, how do you get it to the people who really need it, right? The affordability issue, because need is not just, not the issue that we're talking about, it is demand. Now, if you're dealing with people who can't afford to pay 3,000 rupees for a solar light, then you'll say, okay, I'll bring down the cost to 1,000. Fine. But there are still many people who can't afford 1,000. But they need the light. What do we do with them? So you look at other options, which are not technology options, you look at financing options, right? For example, you could do installment financing, or you could do what else? Rental, right? Basically, both installments and rentals are two ways of addressing the same problem, which is that I need a lump sum, I don't have it, but integrated over time, I can get it. Right. So what we are going to show you is how we worked with Panasonic, the Japanese company, who are only into solar panels, by the way, in India. They were not making any products, even though they are a consumer product company. And we helped them to research the consumer market, the lower end consumer market, because they had some corporate mandate to do, work at the base of the pyramid. And then come up with not just the product, which they mostly did, and it's not, any exceptional product, but the distribution channels and the financing options by which it could reach a large number of people. This is about 4-5 minutes, huh? So I think.
This is the story of 3 women from villages in Bihar. From the outside, their villages seem like typical impoverished communities. But they are incubating an extraordinary solution to the lack of reliable, safe, and affordable clean energy. In Bihar, India, electrification rates are the lowest in the nation, with household access rates below 16% and female unemployment at 24%. To address these challenges, the Basic Social Enterprise Group, a consortium of companies that seeks to improve the livelihoods of poor people in India, developed a solar entrepreneur program. The goal of the initiative is to provide solar products to underserved populations to increase their income-generating capacity. In order to reach these customers, Basics has specifically encouraged women to become solar entrepreneurs. Basics provides its solar entrepreneurs with trade finance so that they can start solar retail and rental businesses. These dynamic women tell us about how their lives have been transformed by the financing and training that enabled them to be purveyors and purchasers of clean energy.
So this is one of the 2 models. where it's
For
sold in
solar
retail.
sales, Basics provides its entrepreneurs with extended credit terms. They get solar equipment to sell and have 30 days to pay it back. In turn, the entrepreneurs offer their customers an informal loan to purchase solar equipment, which includes a 1,500 rupee lantern or a 5,000 rupee solar home system. Customers pay back these loans through small installments.
सबसे पहले तो लोगों के साथ बैठने का मौका मिलता है, बात करते हैं, एसएचजी के माध्यम से इसको लाइट बेचते हैं।
SHG means self-help group.
एसएचजी में जाते हैं तो मीटिंग भी करवा लेते हैं, प्लस डेमो हमारे पास लाइट रहता है और वो लाइट दिखाते हैं, इसका मतलब खामियां दिखाते हैं, उसको खामियां बताते हैं, इस लाइट में ये खामियां हैं। हमारे घर के बच्चों को पढ़ने में सबसे पहले सुविधा होगी, जिससे आँख पे रोशनी नहीं, मतलब आँख का रोशनी उसका मतलब नहीं जाएगा।
ग्राहक को लाइट देते हैं तो ग्राहक से हम पूछते हैं, बात करते हैं वहाँ पे कि दीदी आप हम लाइट तो दें लेकिन इसको आप किस किस तरह के उपयोग में लाते हैं। कि उन लोग देखते हैं कि मुर्गी फार्म में जाती है, लगा देते हैं, रात के मुर्गी बच्चा रहता है, छोटा बच्चा रहता है तो मर जाता है, तो अंधेरा में अंधेरा रहने से हम खुद से कस्टमर को अपने पास से देते हैं, अपने उनको हम जा कर के पहुँचाते हैं, पूछते रहते भी हैं उनको से कि लाइट आपको कैसा है, कैसा लगता है, चल रहा है या ना चल रहा है। इन लोग से अगर लिए हैं तो पूछती भी है और वैसा कोई दिक्कत होता है तो घर तक हमको सेवा मिल जाता है। अगर खरीदते थे तो कोई रिस्पॉन्स नहीं, कोई हमको पूछने तक नहीं आता था।
Over time, out of the rental fees she earns. After about 2 years, she owns the equipment outright, and her rental business becomes even more profitable.
इस गांव में हमारे 23 ग्राहक हैं, 5 रुपये पर डे देते हैं, 150 रुपये मंथली देते हैं। ऐसे भी लोग अब 23 लोग मेरे घर में आते हैं, जाते हैं, बातचीत अच्छा से रहता है। और लोग कभी कभी कुछ करते हैं शादी ब्याह तो फिर पूछते हैं कि और हमको लाइट चाहिए, उसको देते हैं। और ये लाइट जब से है तब से हम भी अपना, पहले सरकारी स्कूल में पढ़ाती थी अपने बेटी को, प्राइवेट स्कूल में एडमिशन करवा दिए हैं तो पढ़ती है वहाँ।
Through the opportunities provided by Basics, these women entrepreneurs not only increase their own incomes, they also gain the confidence that comes with running a business. They build social capital, and they improve the lives of others in their communities. Basics has developed this solar initiative with support from REM, the Renewable Energy Microfinance and Microenterprise Program. REM is funded by USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, and implemented by ARC Finance.
Entity that's required to make almost any project that you're going to make will have to be made by an enterprise. Can you tell me if any of you will make a project which will be made by an individual? Very unlikely, right? The moment we talk of an enterprise, you're dealing with a totally different order of magnitude of complexity. Some of the richest people in India for a day to promote the idea of giving, he has this one-day seminar on giving, and I've had the honor of being invited there a couple of times to talk about what is social entrepreneurship. So I actually used this diagram in my last meeting. Sorry, it's a bit small font, but I guess we can. इसमें pointer है ना? हाँ, ठीक है, okay. So I need. If this looks unfamiliar, don't worry. In 2 minutes, we'll master it. So let me just start with the x-axis is both time and output. Okay, so time usually in years and output in, let's say, rupees. And the y-axis is both cost as well as revenue. Okay, revenue is the gross income that the enterprise makes. Okay, now this curve is the total cost curve, the red colored curve. Okay. When you start an enterprise, the cost is non-zero, literally from the day you start. I mean, you can fool yourself for a while by saying, no, I am working from home and I eat my parents' food and all that, but that's, there's a subsidy there, right? But even if you pay yourself 1/10 of the salary you'll get in placement, there is some cost, and after a while your favorite aunt will say, okay, enough, my garage, I need it, so get out, right? So after a while you run out of freebies. So there is a cost. Unfortunately, whatever product or service you are making, initially both its volumes and its the pricing is such that your revenue curve, total revenue curve, is far below the cost curve. Okay, so this hashed area L1 is where you are accumulating losses. Who will pay for this? I'm perfecting my design, please leave me alone. Fine. Who will pay for it in the meantime? Right? Say, well, in Google there is that X lab, no? Somebody must be paying for it. Well, that's because Google Inc. makes lots of money. Then, okay, CSIR. Well, the government of India taxes all of us and gives some of it to CSIR. So before money can be put into your enterprise, it has to be made somewhere, either as a profit or as a tax, right? Now, there is this other problem that there are two kinds of costs. Let's take a very simple product like this ball pen. Let's say that it has some 3-4 components, the spring and the the plastic body and the whatever the refill. So, and all that I am sourcing from elsewhere, and it costs me, those raw material cost me 4 rupees, and I got a very adept assembler who assembles it in such a way that she can do 100 in a day, and 200 in a day, and I pay her 200 rupees. So 1 rupee per. So my variable cost for this is 5 rupees. I go to the market and I go to the Ghatkopar stationery wala and say, ye dekho, brilliant IIT design pen. I say, अच्छा छोड़ जाओ, 3 रुपए में छोड़ जाओ. 3 रुपए, अरे यार बनाने का दाम 5 रुपए है साहब. अरे यार आगे जाओ, बहुत आता है तुम्हारा जैसा. So you say, अच्छा है, I have to introduce my माल in the market. अच्छा रख लो साहब, 3.5 रुपए दे देना, चलो रख दो. So 5 is your variable cost, you are getting 350 per, and this is assuming he will pay you off 6 months after while he sold it. All that complication we won't go into. So what is your revenue per pen? 3 rupee 50 paisa, right? Unit revenue. And cost, variable cost, right? So the difference between unit revenue and unit cost is called contribution. I am using the word in a technical sense, not in like what is the contribution to the nation. No, nahi. The contribution is, as you use in management accounting, contribution in that case is minus 1 rupee 50 paisa. If that is so and remains so for a long time, what will you do? But if you don't want to close, what will you do? Either you work to reduce the cost to below 350, or you find somewhere where it sells for more than 5 rupees. So let's say you are super efficient already and it can't go below 5 rupees. So yeah, this Ghatkopar market is too bloody competitive. Chalo, I will go to, Panvel. Okay, so you go to Panvel. And there, sure enough, you find a stationer who says, okay, good, nice pen, IIT pen. Okay, ठीक है. 6 रुपए में दे दो. Okay. The moment you can sell it for anything which gives you a positive contribution, that is when you have proof of concept. Not when the pen works in the lab. Sir, see how nicely it writes. That's not proof of concept. Okay? That's a technical proof of concept. But there is no such thing as a product which is only made in the lab, unfortunately. Products are made by enterprises. Enterprises go and sell it to other enterprises. Everybody wants to make a profit. Right? So, this critical place in time, this X1, is the place where the revenue per unit covers the variable cost per unit. In other words, the contribution turns positive. The day that happens, celebrate. That itself is a huge achievement. I can guarantee you, having seen hundreds of enterprises of all, thousands, maybe lakhs in micro level, but in terms of, enterprises at the higher level, 80% don't make it to the startups. I'm not talking about running enterprises. They don't make it to this stage where they are able to steadily earn revenue which is positive contribution. But even after that, actually you haven't, I'm assuming we'll continue till 1, is that okay? Yeah. Even after that, unfortunately, there is something called overheads, yeah? Remember that rent you have to pay for that garage where you're assembling this, right? And electricity bill also comes once a month. And then you have to pay some salary. And those costs are fixed costs. They have nothing to do with how many pens did you assemble. Well, that lady who is assembling the pens, she is being paid strictly per pen, so she is a variable cost. But you yourself and the rent and the electricity, etc., are period costs. They are fixed per period. So, when you drop the accounts at the end of the month, you say, "Arey yaar, per pen I made 1 rupee, boss, and I sold 200 into 30, 6,000 pens this month. So, I made 6,000 rupees positive contribution. But my overheads are 10,000. क्या करेगा? You're still in this red zone. Okay. But at this stage, it's likely that you may find somebody other than the 3 Fs. At this stage, you only have 3 Fs. You know what the 3 Fs are? Who will fund you at this stage? When you are making a pen for 5 rupees and it sells for 350, who will fund you? Friends, family and fools. Okay? Friends, family and fools will fund you here. Also known as, very respectfully known as social investment. Okay? So, but once you start making a positive contribution, all kinds of uncles will start coming out of the woodworks. Say, अरे सुना है तुम पेन बना दो 5 रुपए में बना दो 6 रुपए में बेच दो अरे बेटा मेरे से ले लो ना 10,000 रुपए ठीक है okay because they can see that this point will arrive one day. And what is this lovely beautiful point? It's called the break-even point. Break-even point is when the total revenue covers total variable and fixed costs. The day you've reached here, you know what happens? Magically, at the end of the month, there's money in the bank. You know, instead of having to find somebody to fund this red hashed area, a new social investor, a new uncle, a new aunt, okay, you actually have money in the bank. And as that area starts growing, you can attract what is called venture capital. Okay? A lot of people go to venture capitalists when they are somewhere here or somewhere here. And I can guarantee you that 99% of the time the venture capitalists will give you a cup of tea and let you off. They won't invest when you're here. They'll certainly not invest when you're here. Okay? At this stage, you can say, yeah, boss, I'm into innovation, you know. I'm into design and technology. मेरे को ये enterprise वगैरह नहीं चल रहा है. Okay, you can hive it off through franchising, through licensing the technology, you can get royalties. So all that revenue comes up, okay? Or you can say, no, I will now grow it. I want to be MD of a company. Fine. So you raise more money, and that by that stage what is called private equity comes in. Okay? Private equity will only come when they really see this zooming up. In fact, they will not come when the slope is like this, they will come when the slope is like this. Okay? And then thereafter you are in a happy area. Of course, all technologies go obsolescent, competition comes, so eventually this will taper off, and then then you get into enterprise life cycle issues. But staying with a single product, so has any of you thought about these issues related to your project? Then I'm afraid you are at the Indian Museum of Technology. This is the tragedy of our CSIR system, by the way. It's a graveyard of, when Dr. Mashelkar became Director General, he spent 3 years just doing a inventory of all the things that had been so-called patented and ready for commercialization. But in practice, some were here. कई का तो technical proof of concept भी नहीं था, but those which fulfill that, they were here or here. Okay. Now, if you want, in your youthful idealism, to actually not worry about building those gizmos, but to improve this world in some way or the other through whatever you are working on, then I'm sorry, you have to deal with this. There is no escape. You can take an easier path and say, okay, I'll have a partner, वो कोई MBA type ले लेगा, वो करेगा ये सब, ठीक है, that's fine, that's another way, but you will have to deal with this. Okay. Otherwise, there is no chance that you will make it to those places. So I have 15 minutes, which I'll stop here. The 2 main inputs that I gave, one was start with the consumer side, the demand side. That itself has many complications. There's implicit or unexpressed need, there's expressed need, there's demand. There's also this new category called unimagined need, like who thought of the Sony Walkman or the iPhone before it came. But when you actually sit down and analyze in terms of its attributes, then you will realize that those needs existed, that need set existed. It's just that the product has been so beautifully designed to meet that need set. Okay. So one is this and the second is this. Because of the unfortunate reality that we are living in a complex world, almost nothing that you do can be done individually. you'll need an enterprise. Heavy dose, but it's my job to take you to your zone of discomfort. I know technologically this is IIT, you will all produce fantastic stuff. That's not the point. But let's start from there and let's deal with this. So we can take questions for the next 15 minutes. Leave this on in case they have questions.
Self-help groups, how there's quite a variation in how effective they are. So, what would you say? I mean, what seems to really make a difference in their self-motivation to sort of go to the clients, go to users, and really motivate them to examine what they have to offer?
Well, if they're organized by reasonably adept NGOs, because NGOs, if they're good at anything, it is social processes, interpersonal processes. So, you will know a self-help group quality by who has organized it, So, there are also these what I call 14th August and 25th January self-help groups. They were formed because the next day they had to be inaugurated, 1st October also. So, but those are naam ke vaste. It's just a list of women living in the same neighborhood. But in a self-help group where there have been a lot of initial awareness building, a lot of spend time together before they actually decide to work together, where participation by every member is evoked, and where rules are framed by themselves, and there's a steadiness of the process, it's not rushed through. Those generally are quite solid.
I guess the reassurance given to both self-help and the final person who's buying it, the constant reassurance that somebody's there in the background
Yes.
to take care of any possible problematic event or something.
Yeah.
That is quite crucial.
Yeah.
Can you share your personal journey of being a social entrepreneur, both pleasant and unpleasant things?
एक दिन लगेगा. नहीं, वो तो लंबा कहानी है. But are you guys bored, stunned? What happened? It was like completely unexpected. Yeah. So Aarti teaches marketing, right? So you suddenly realize that it's of relevance. Why IIT is even bothered to have a department of management and then within that marketing. Right? So unfortunately, the problem is that technology is embedded in the world of economics. And economics is embedded in the social world, in society, So if you talk to economists, they keep saying, "Arey, the whole thing is distorted." They are not rational. But truly rational is what it is. Whatever society is, that's rational, So we have to deal with it the way it is. So I'll play another brief video to answer your question, Aarti. It's very hard to sort of capture how I got into all this, but very briefly, I went to IIT in the early 70s, 70 to 75. That was a period of pretty serious turmoil in the country, 72 is when India turned 25, and there's general soul searching that, where are we, etc., etc., and we got sensitized to these issues at that stage. And engineering gives you a problem solving attitude. So you say, okay, what can I do about it, rather than if I was across the fence in JNU, I'd be just analyzing. But being at IIT, I would be saying, okay, theek hai, what can you do about it? And fairly early, I felt that while health, education, and numerous other things are all needed by people, but if they had enough income, then they could probably buy all of these, So therefore, I kind of converged onto this, what today we call livelihoods. In those days, we used to call it income generation activities and so on and so forth. But then the onion keeps unpeeling, So once we got into that work, we realized, array, to start anything you need capital. और बैंक तो देता ही नहीं है, कितनी बार जाने पड़ता है, and even though they have a mandate that they're supposed to give loans to the poor and this and that circular, but कोई देता ही नहीं है. So it's wasted like a whole decade in doing something, but at highly constrained by availability of capital. And so, started searching for how can we get access to capital, and then came to learn about the field called microcredit, and then set up a microfinance institution. And by that, I was already like 20 years behind Professor Yunus. So I therefore learned from all their, birth defects, their successes as well as their birth defects. And one of the big problems was that most microfinance at that stage was highly subsidized. So I said, oh God, आसमान से गिरे खजूर में अटके, उससे अच्छा तो नहीं करे. So started what is called commercial microfinance, based on borrowing from banks, but banks won't lend to somebody who doesn't have equity. So got into this whole financial world, and so from the time we started, we were in 1996 the first microfinance institution, and we've done over $1 billion worth of microfinance. But more importantly, I can't claim that single-handedly I've done it, but have helped contribute to establish this, this sector, where in the 1990s, nothing used to come to the poor from banks. Now every year, through microfinance institutions and through the self-help group, 2 channels, roughly about 1 lakh crores comes from the banking system to this. It's still very small, it's a fraction of a need, but at least now there's a whole industry, and basics is now nowhere in that. We are tiny compared to some of the big ones, but we've had the satisfaction of setting it up. But then the other thing that we realize is credit is itself, again the onion unpeels, and realize that the credit is just one of the financial services. People also need to save, they also need insurance, they need to transfer money, receive government payments, all of that. And for that, the gateway is a bank account. You can't do anything without a bank account. And that was such a big constraint. When I was a member of the Rangarajan Committee on Financial Inclusion in 2007, there were only 56 million bank accounts in India. Okay. And I stood up in a conference and said that a day will come when India will have more mobile phones than bank accounts. And one RBI general manager came and said, shh, you should not talk like that, it's very disrespectful. Well, it took only 18 months after that for mobile phones to cross the number of bank accounts. But finally, we now are in a happy state in India, where due to the work done starting from 2007, what's called financial inclusion, now there are, thanks also to the government adopting it and the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana and all of that, now vast majority of Indians adult Indians have bank accounts. 21 crore bank accounts got opened under Jan Dhan Yojana in the last 2 years alone. But accounts is not enough. If all those people turned up in bank branches, you'll have chaos. So you needed transaction outlets. ATMs are too expensive. So you needed some other way to transact. And that thing is called a BC outlet, a business correspondent, a banking correspondent outlet. Okay. So I'll just show you a brief video of a company that we set up using mobile phone technology to enable people to first open bank accounts and then transact. In some ways, this kind of summarizes. I mean, if there's one thing I can say I'm proud of having been to IIT and IIM and done something in life, it's that this thing now reaches millions of Indians and helps them to do things better.
Transactions. The promise of this is to enable people to carry out micro transactions. You just saw somebody deposit 100 rupees, $2, completely authorized, written already in the core banking system, and with a paper receipt, all happening using mobile telephones for connectivity. So this is truly a high-tech solution, but brought to outlets like this, grocery stores, telephone booths, and so on, where people anyway come for their day-to-day transactions. Sub K means below 1,000 rupees, which is about $20. And in the long run, we also hope below 1,000 meters. That's the distance that we expect any transaction point to have from any customer.
इसके पहले भी था? So he didn't have a bank account before this. Huh? So he's opening a new bank account.
Sab K in Hindi means for everybody. And the byline is Sab ke liye samruddhi laaye, means we're bringing prosperity to everyone.
He's brought 2 photographs and he's brought a copy of his election card, which is a government document which also has this photograph.
Yes, 1 for Telugu, 2 for Kannada, 3 for Hindi, 4 for English, 5 for Marathi.
So it's already 5 languages. So what he did just now was give a voice password, but because it's in his voice, it doesn't matter whether he's saying it aloud. You know, if I say the same thing, Boy Narayana, it won't let me open it.
So, welcome new customer of Sabke. Microfinance in the old style way anyway didn't have any savings in India. So, it's really adding micro savings, remittances and government payments, 3 important services to microcredit, and therefore making the whole model viable. So, with this, we think we will make the next breakthrough in the availability of financial services to the poor. You know, they had like 25 customers, all were using the same password because it's voice based, so it doesn't matter, you know, what. See you when you have your 1 lakh customer, huh? Which will be shortly.
Just 1 month away.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that was in sometime in 2011, and now Sabke itself has about 2 million customers, but there are many Sabke type companies now. So together, I think some 100 million customers using, and the technology now which is used is not voice biometric, but thumbprint, because Aadhaar went for thumbprint, so we had to switch. So, but this is a classic example of, you know, how you can use very high tech to serve the base of the pyramid. But the only way you can get there is by crossing these 2 things. So while Sabke technology was fantastic, 5 years ahead of everybody, it took a lot of you know, financial engineering to get Sabke to break even, and it took 4 years. It exists, it's in its 6th year, and it's just about you know, beginning to make some money. So welcome to the real world, and all the best with your projects. Thank you.